smart charging? What does it mean? What does it entail? And then also go to the currently nowadays use cases of smart charging, how it's actually used today, where and who's participating, and also wants to put some focus on challenges, opportunities, because I think it's in the industry quite a big buzzword. There's a lot of upsides with it, but there's also a lot of challenges with it as well. So I think it's most interesting for you to also see like how does it behave from theory to the practical application of it, and maybe also to take away some learnings. And then point 4, I would like you to engage in group exercise, which I will present at that point, where we also put in the buzzword AI to this and see and discuss some AI solutions that you might think of. But I will come to this later. And at the end, obviously, conclusion, asking questions, clarifying questions, whatever's on your interest. Maybe briefly to me, I told you my name is Nika. I'm currently working as a product owner for IT services at Mercedes. And before I was a Sumo student, and before that I was working at E.ON and also was a working student at InnoToGrid. We're also on the campus. And my focus has always been kind of the intersection between charging and charging infrastructure. Especially at E.ON, energy as a grid provider as well is very important to consider this side. At Mercedes now, we obviously have in mind the user's perspective and the UX of smart charging. So this was always kind of my focus area. Right now, I'm also working in this project for Mercedes with the Mobility House, where we're actually trying to bring a V1G or V2G product to the market, which is also quite challenging, but that has other reasons, which I don't want to dive into today. All right, so starting with the question, what is smart charging? So some of you raise your hand. Can you please raise your hands again if you've heard about smart charging or if you know about smart charging? All right, not too many people. I also know that EVs or like personal vehicles are not really a focus topic when talking about sustainable mobility, because in the end, having a private car, just one seat occupied or 5 seats is not really sustainable. So this smart charging has always to be understood for definitely private people, private use cases, but obviously also for business use cases and public use cases, like for example buses. In Berlin, actually, I don't know the details, but we've also made a field trip to the zoo, and there you can see that there are also charging stations for buses, for electric buses in Berlin, and they also apply some smart charging technologies. So whatever I'm talking here about smart charging, I might have a bit more expertise to the private sector, but there's definitely also use cases for the business sector, which we can also discuss here. So starting with telling you something about smart charging. So basically smart charging, smart can mean a lot of different things, but in terms of EV charging, it means the controlled charging of EVs. And the controlled charging can either be to charge at the lowest price, charge at the greenest energy availability. These are, from user perspective, probably the most interesting use cases. And smart charging can be unidirectional and bidirectional. So unidirectional V1G means that you just charge energy from your wall box or from the infrastructure into your car when it's cheapest. So you have like one way, which is, I would say, fairly easy to understand. With the energy prices, when they are low, you charge. When the energy is free, you charge, basically. But then there are also bidirectional use cases, which means there's energy that's going into your car and also out of your car. And that's especially interesting if you look at the energy demands and also the availability at a longer time period, so that you can maybe charge energy when it's super cheap, like 1 cent per kilowatt hour. But then the day later, you see, oh, there's energy that's actually being sold for minus 10 cents per kilowatt hour, because that can also be the case in Europe. So you want to discharge your car again to maybe let your home appliances run on of your energy, sorry. And then you can start the bidirectional charging. So there's 2 ways of charging, inside into the car and out of the car. And that's also in the interest of having the greenest possible energy or the cheapest possible energy, for example. And then these signals which I mentioned, green energy prices, they are based on 3 different factors. It is the user who wants to charge the cheapest, the grid, who definitely has different interests. I will come to that later as well. And obviously the vehicle, which is in between that. And for the grid, I would account also the wallbox or the charging infrastructure as well. And then the question, what is smart, is always what do you want to optimize. So when and how energy is charged is the basic question, and that obviously has a room of a lot of complexity. So if you want to combine those factors, if you even observe like more than one charging point, more than one vehicle, it gets a lot more complicated to really optimize the usage of energy. And I wanted to display this with this triangle here. So you have these 3 different sides, which is the user who's mostly cost sensitive, who wants to always have the lowest prices, but who also has the mobility need. So he needs to be mobile with his car. If you purchase a car today, it's super expensive and you need to get from A to B as often as you want, as long as you want, as soon as you want, whatever. So you have a mobility need which always must be desired. Then you have the vehicle, which obviously, speaking from a systems perspective, is also interesting, but there you have other components which are also very different in many vehicles. Also, if you observe different manufacturers, then you have different components as well. And you have the flexible battery, which means it's flexible in terms of charging power in, charging power outwards, but also flexible in terms of location, because you usually don't have that. You usually have maybe energy at your home, maybe you have like PV on your rooftop, and then you can store energy at home, but normally you cannot really move this energy. So this is also a very new factor and very interesting factor for the smart charging industry. And in the end, you have the grid, or maybe also the infrastructure, which means when is energy available, how much is available, at what cost is it available, how green is it available, and this can really make a difference in the ecological effect that you in fact have. I mean, EVs always say that they are like more sustainable than ICEs, and there are like physical factors for this. But in theory, if you would charge just with very, very brown energy, then you would also not be more sustainable maybe than driving an ICE. Of course, there's always other things adding to this, but this is very important to have the ecological impact in mind. And then smart charging is in the middle because it combines everything, and that's what I told you guys already is V1G, unidirectional charging, and V2G, bidirectional charging. And for V2G, you can even split it up into the terms V2L, which means vehicle to load. You might have seen some advertisements, I think, from Hyundai. You can plug something in your car and then you can charge your laptop with it, or you can use your hairdryer with it so that you have like a load which you use, or V2H, which stands for vehicle to home, so that you can even run your home appliances with it, for example, during the night. So this is what I would, how I would present smart charging. Maybe starting here, do you guys have any questions for the basic terms, maybe for the basic idea of it? Was it clear so far? It's clear, okay. Then let's continue. As I told you guys, these are the 3 different actors when it comes to smart charging systems, because smart charging is not always just one perspective, it's always a system perspective. And as I told you guys, the users, they want to be always mobile and always free in their mobility. They want to demand the lowest cost for energy, and they can act spontaneously. And that's something that's really bringing up challenges, because usually you might have your 9-to-5 job or university, and then you know when you have to leave home and when you come back, and then the car usually is parked at your home maybe throughout the whole night. That's like the perfect world of smart charging. But then obviously, when you look at Berlin, you don't always have a garage or Wallbox at home. So there's like limiting factors by the place you live, by the maybe also cost of living that you can afford. And then also by your choices in your free time. So you can be spontaneous and say like, okay, I have some friends who want to go out in the night, let's take the car to go somewhere, I don't know, to Potsdam, for example. And then you have a limited predictability from system perspective. From the grid, you also have to be always stable up by law. So you cannot really play around with some measures and just put energy everywhere where it's demanded. So you have to be always stable and up. So you also have limiting factors by grid, by law. And then we also currently always have gray energy, even though sometimes the shares of sustainable energies are higher or lower. but in fact, there's always gray energy in the grid right now. And that's something that is just a fact that will be changed hopefully in the future. But by now, you can just have like a limited availability of pure green energy, I would say, or if it's more gray mix. And yeah, the grid is in high need of energy storages because, you know, the last few days there was a lot of sun out, so you need to store the PV energy somewhere, which could be cars, but then again, users can be spontaneous and drive around with the car all day when the sun is nice, wherever. So there's a need to have the cars and the users at the same places all over again so that you can really predict where and how to store energy. And then in the end, you have the vehicle, because this is the very expensive system component. Speaking for Mercedes, it's super expensive, but also speaking for other manufacturers, cars are just expensive. There are cheaper ones, there are more expensive ones, but in fact, they are all expensive. And this is also something you don't want to really, you want to keep and you want to take care of. You don't want to just let the energy run energy in and out and in and out until it's destroyed after 1 year, you know? So something that actually is a term right now is the virtual mileage. So if you discharge your car, in the end, the battery has wear and tear, even though you didn't drive. So having something in mind of this cost that actually is there in the background while saving money for charging is something that's also limiting the smart charging system. And from a user perspective, electric vehicles must also have the same reliability as ICE vehicles, because right now you can go to the fuel station, you can fill up your car anytime, anywhere basically, at least in Germany, and that's quite easy. And in order to have acceptance for electric vehicles, we must remain the same reliability. So if you just say, okay, I want to have smart charging during the night, and it doesn't work, and then the next morning your car's empty, you're super frustrated and you don't really trust NEVs anymore. So we must also keep this reliability. And as I told you with this range here, there's a limitation in signals and switches, which you put energy in and out of the vehicle, for example, during the night or during the week. So this is what makes the smart charging system actually quite complex, because you have different interests everywhere. We'll also come back to that on a few slides. But this is where you see the room of complexity grows and grows. The more users you have, the more complex it gets. The more grid providers or the more country borders you have, the more complex it gets. And also the more different vehicles you have, different specs, the more complex it gets. And that always adds up together. And this is why I also want this as one of the key takeaways today. Even though smart charging is promising lots of good stuff and definitely has opportunities which we'll come back to, smart charging is a multi-layered problem. So there's not one single instance who can solve this. There's people who are building smart charging systems with their home, smart homes, for example, custom smart homes. This is one solution, but this is not a large-scale solution. Then there's OEMs, for example, who try to bring their solutions in, but this is also just one solution. It's always a multi-layered problem which has to be solved by also all actors. So it's not just a feature that could be brought with smart charging, even though it's mostly advertised as something. It's also not just a hardware thing, it's something that's like really complex, and also in the end always has this energy must be up by law, so you have also regulations which you have to take into account here. All right. Do you have any questions? No. If not, then good. Then let's take a look on how is it used today. So there's plenty of smart charging solutions, which I also told you about. You can differentiate in many different terms. I wanted to just give you the differentiation today between private charging and public charging. And the private charging is, as it says, mostly B2C, which means that you have private customers like all of us are, and you could, for example, have at your home or maybe in your garage some wallbox, either it's yours or maybe it's from your landlord, and then you can have like a wallbox steered V1G solution, so that the wallbox is intelligent, it steers when it's energy cheap, when is it not. The same can be done by the vehicle. If the vehicle has an upright internet connection, it can steer when do I want to get my energy and when not. So these are two different things. And the third one, which is a bit more complex, but definitely also more interesting, is home energy solutions. So if you consider all of your home as one energy ecosystem, you have the PV, which provides energy. You might have the storage, some hands here, and then you can also set up, do I want to have the energy from the grid? Do I want to have it from a rooftop? Do I want to have it from a battery? And that's also factors, of course, where weather is something very important. If where also your personal use of other electricity, for example, for cooking, for putting up the oven, is very important. So these are some use cases where private charging can be done smart. And what's also extremely interesting is for the dynamic electricity tariffs. So I told you guys that green energy charging is interesting, obviously due to an ecological factor, but for economical factors, you can also have dynamic electricity tariffs. Do you guys know anything about these? Have you heard about these? Yeah.
Well, the prices for electricity change over the course of the day.
Yeah.
And as you said before, can be negative as well.
Yeah, right. So it's very, it can be very changing, even within a day, it can be very changing. Actually, every 15 minutes, the energy price can change. So that means that obviously, if you have the risk of having high prices and very low prices in one day, you want to charge for the lowest prices. So this is where it gets extremely interesting, but you always have to consider that this is not the majority of people, at least in Germany, who have such tariffs. So if you just have a normal household like I have, for example, I don't want the dynamic energy tariff, so I don't have to look on my app to see if I can afford to put on the oven or not. So there's always a limiting factor and also acceptance for users about this. So this is what I would consider the most recent use cases for private charging. And for public charging, as I told you, you can also apply it, for example, for depots in fleets, for example, for buses, as BVG is doing it. So if you have, 10 buses who all have to charge at the same time, the energy price might be very high, so the actual cost of charging adds up. But if you have the whole night time to steer whenever the energy is cheapest, because the buses don't ride on time and the other buses are on the road, then you can have a huge leverage on decreasing energy prices. And this is done by load management, mostly by a lot of interconnected wallboxes. It can also be done by a lot of interconnected vehicles, but connecting wallboxes is currently the most cheapest option to do so. And it's also independent from the manufacturer where you get the bus, for example, from. If you see the Amazon trucks or vans driving around the city, there are hundreds of them at one site, and if they have to charge all at the same time in the night, it might be very expensive. So there's also a very important fact about the total cost of ownership of such cars, of such vehicles, which you want to lower with this. So actually, for the public charging sector, it's I think, at least from what I see in the industry, it's less discussed, but it's definitely more interesting from an economic perspective, and also in the end, by an ecological perspective. There's mostly a correlation between green energy and cheap energy, because if you have a lot of sunshine and a lot of wind blowing, then the energy is mostly green and also mostly cheap, because it has to be consumed faster. You cannot store it as easily. But there's not always this correlation. So it's something that you could assume, but this wouldn't be scientifically right, and I'm at the wrong place to assume this here. So this is how I would differentiate private and public use cases, and they both can be uni and bidirectional. So for example, if you have 10 buses parking through the night in a BVG depot, then you have obviously a huge amount of energy storage that you could make use of for bidirectional charging. But then at the end, you also don't want the wear and tear in exceeding factors. So there's always a balance that you have to find. Yeah.
Now I have a question.
Yeah.
For the dynamic pricing, is it already possible in smart solutions to, as a private consumer, have the cable plugged in during the day or at the office or whatsoever, and to kind of put a threshold or a limiter over which, so for a price, over which the car stops stops charging to make sure that there's always only going to be the charging for a lower price or a cheaper price.
Yeah.
Also,
Yeah, there is. There's plenty of solutions on the market actually. I don't know the app where I've seen this, but it's possible. It's already available in some apps. And as from user perspective, there's just mostly two factors that you want to set. So one is when do I want to leave, and the second is how far I will need to go when I leave. So basically, what you said is the departure time. Mostly, I would say like 7 or 8 in the morning, and the target start of charge of the battery, which could be for a smaller car like a Mini and electric Mini, could be like 80% because you need to go, I don't know, out of Berlin and back. That's maybe more. But if you have like big vehicles like a Tesla, for example, where you have huge range, then it could also be enough to have like 50% state of charge. And then these are the two limiting factors for these providers. And in between, they do everything they can to lower the prices. And they obviously search for the lowest prices at the very beginning, but they iterate this every 50 minutes and see when are the prices the lowest. And obviously, if there's a threshold which is set, which is always like exceeded over the whole day, then you have to take other actions in the app maybe. That can also be the case, like with dynamic prices, for example. But generally speaking, this is possible, and this is also being done like this constant optimization of finding the lowest charging slots. Maybe I can also just very briefly show you a website which I think is very interesting for this. I hope you can see it. Yes, it's energycharts.info, and this is the traffic light for energy, for example, in Germany. This is not purely based on the share of renewable energies, but there you could possibly already see when do I want to charge my car, obviously when it's green. So there it's like the greenest energy. If you look on prices, we could do similar graphs, for example. But if you guys are interested in this, I can really recommend this page. There's also even something which shows you the actual prices. And there you can already see charging here would be, let's see the prices, roughly 300 euros per megawatt hour, and charging here is 120. So it's more than double as cheap as to the highest place. So it's really something that can make a huge factor on charging. Yeah.
How do electricity providers or suppliers like those smart charging solutions when private customers, also companies, optimize the pricing all the time and basically also lower the price for them? Because electricity providers also want to, so would that essentially mean that maybe for customers that do not have access to smart charging solutions, the prices would increase because the providers have to kind of allocate the prices to different off-takers?
It can be the case. That's actually a question that I also have and I don't have an answer to. So I think also if you like, in the end, in maybe 10 years, have 80% of the cars always on the cam during the night and all they optimize, or that is optimizing, in the end, it might be now, I don't know. Maybe you would have these other 20% who would have to cover the cost. I think there's no answer to this, at least I don't know any answer to this yet. But it would definitely be an interesting case in the future, yeah. I can say that there's actually some companies who went back to like normal energy prices, but while you do the smart charging, you get like other incentives in the background. So they will be deducted from your monthly tariff, but you will never have the danger of exceeding, I don't know, 50 cents per kilowatt hour. So there's lots of things going on in the market, but there's no solid solution on how to solve this on the long term right now. Yeah.
So the link?
The link?
The link.
Yeah, it's energy-charts.info.
Energy chart?
Yeah. If you want to look this up, yeah. I can also put it somewhere in the presentation, which I can share with you guys. Yeah, just I think what's happening on the energy market as I said, like it's always a system, so it's getting more complex on each side. At the end, the user just has this probably the same steady desire also in 10 years. He wants the lowest prices. But what's being done in between with the vehicles, with the grid, with the energy providers, that's a challenge that they might have to solve. But obviously, it's always about user acceptance, because otherwise you will lose customers, and then there's no offer anymore. It will be an ongoing problem, I would say. Yeah. Any other questions here? Otherwise, I would also, because we talked about this, I would just briefly mention who is even involved in that. Like in this big system of charging, there are many stakeholders. Obviously, the EV driver is the first one. It's all about how many people adopt EVs, how many people want to do the smart charging, and that's I would say the key number, which also then says something about which vehicle OEMs do even participate. Like, does everyone offer this? Is this a future-proof solution? Do we need that? I think the need is there, but how do we solve that is the other question. So they have to get in touch with the energy providers. Like, how do we solve this? How do we get together? How do we send us your pricing data? How do we get your how do we send you our demands from the charging perspective? So there's also a lot of communication going on in between, which also influences the prices and the markets and everything. And then you have the grid operators, which are mostly very connected to the energy providers. So they have to make sure that the energy is always stable enough at the energy network. So you cannot just put the energy to some location, I don't know, move everything from northern Germany to Munich. It's just not possible because in the night the prices they were cheaper. So you have to also find ways on how to keep the energy network stable and the grid, maybe also microgrids, thinking microgrids, how you make these work before you put it up to the bigger network. And then there's starting hardware vendors, obviously. We need to supply everyone with infrastructure, let it be EVG depots, let it be the Eulers campus, for example. We also have many different charge points here. And they also have an interest in contributing, making sure that the right signals are sent and received. And in the end, there will always be regulators. And this might be on a German level, this might be on Berlin level, but this might also be on the EU level, because the EU energy grid is also interconnected. So you have to find common ground there as well. It's and this is, I think, the part where I have the least knowledge, but where it's also the most things that are still to be done, still to be defined. Yeah. And obviously, you have a lot of people involved, a lot of different companies maybe involved if this is a private solution. Maybe you could even think of more. I couldn't when I took a look at this yesterday again. But for sure, everyone has different thoughts of like what's interesting for me, what's in there for me, how do I make money out of this. Even the private people have interest in how to make money out of this. Just seen an Instagram reel today that someone was asked by his neighbor to charge because the energy price was like minus 10 cents per kilowatt hour. So the neighbor was on vacation. His neighbor charged his Tesla, and while he was on vacation, he made like, I don't know, $5 because of charging the neighborhood for free. So there's always incentives, but they might be conflicting, and that's the difficulty about it. Any question here? Can you maybe even think of other people who are involved, other actors?
I mean, you can go further also when we talk about energy providers, right? That it's not only electric energy providers, so like everything where electricity is needed. To think of like synthetic fuel production or something. So I mean, there are different playing fields that are in the second or first step both, I would say.
Yeah. Maybe also, I don't know, an employer who wants to provide this to the employees. Can also be someone who's interested. Yeah. All right. Yeah. So I hope you guys see that there's a lot of potential, but there's also a lot of things to discuss and to overcome when you want to find your own solution. I mean, having this maybe for your home, if you have like a one family home, if you have like your own garage, this might be the easiest use case of all, but does apply for just a small percentage of people around the world, and also in Germany and Berlin. So let's talk about some challenges and opportunities. Actually, this is more like the challenges, because the opportunity is, I think, quite clear. You can save money while you charge your car. There's also ways to mitigate the risk of exceeding charge costs. So in the end, you can mostly save money while charging your car. You can make a vehicle, maybe as an OEM, more interesting to be bought by offering more solutions. So there's lots of things which can convince you of doing smart charging. And as I said, if you have like a private home, this might be easy to adopt. But then the question, maybe for all of us in this room, is how do we adopt this, or how are we affected by this? How can we make use of this? And this is then the question, because maybe even if you take like car sharing inside the city and you have an electric car, I think Free2move, they have electric Fiats. But if I unplug a Fiat from a public wallbox because I want to take it to the airport, for example, I want to be sure that the car is fully charged. I don't want the car to charge overnight, even though the person before me just plugged it in. So there's always these issues of perspective, how I would call it. And this is definitely one from a user perspective. They want simplicity. They need everything to work. They need to trust the system, and they need that nothing is like more challenging than before, because driving an ICE is not sustainable, but it's easy, it's convenient right now. Even though it got more expensive, they still can be sure that it's convenient and it'll stay like this in the next, I don't know, 15 years maybe. And they want a full battery when it's needed. That applies for private users, but also maybe for these car sharing, which I just mentioned. So you also want, if you want to drive to the airport, you need to have like 20 kilometers of range. If you don't have it, you're just frustrated, and you maybe also lose trust in this car sharing provider, you lose trust in EVs, and that's something that EVs, I would say, cannot really afford. Working in the sector, maybe you can second this, we need user trust, and that's something that's really important. And yeah, then in the end, your trust in the systems gets limited, and that's the user perspective. But of course, from a system perspective, they need flexibility. So in the best case, I mean, there's also studies that this is mostly the case. In the best case, they would need cars to stand at the same place 23 hours a day. I mean, that's, I think, quite true. But they would need them to be plugged in all the time. And that's something that they would call flexibility. And then they can also predict when it's energy demanded, when it's energy needed, when can we buy it, when can we sell it. And that would be very convenient, obviously. Also, it would be convenient to just switch from V1G to V2G all the times whenever it's needed. But that obviously would also not be the user simplicity and also the cost saving factor for users. So there is challenges in the perspective. And that's also which in fact hinders the scalability of smart charging right now. At least from what I know from the industry, from the B2C sector, it is very hard to convince people about using smart charging because they're not really used to charging at all at first. And then you want to tell them, okay, we decide when the car gets charged. That's something that just doesn't work right now. So the user acceptance is on top of all of that, even though the system definitely has interests and also demands themselves.
Can it also be included into the user's experience without the user even realizing that they're having smart charging? Or is it always the key of smart charging that the user is aware of? Because that's what I was asking before, is that if you're simply putting the charger in your car and then it automatically applies smart charging to always only charge at the cheapest time.
Mm-hmm. I think you could do it that way. At least from my project, I know we never considered it because there can always be failures in the system which you cannot really influence. So imagine your internet is breaking up and your wallbox is not connected to the internet anymore. How does your wallbox then know when to charge and when not to charge? So this is something where the OEM cannot do anything for, maybe even the energy provider and the app provider, they can't do anything about it. But then in the end, the user has an empty car the next morning when he has to go to work. And that, I think this level of frustration and inconvenience and the risk of this is way too high. So you must at least make them aware. I know that providers like NEO, for example, they started this quite easily, so they don't really care what energy supplier you have. They just say, okay, we take the stock market prices and we just adapt it to this, take it or leave it. And that worked quite well for them, even though new sales numbers are not that good, but the adoption of this feature was very good. And just making users aware of this is, I think, the first step to have acceptance. And then the second step would be like maximum transparency, telling them maybe it will be for sure before when you want to leave the house the next morning, but then maybe the next charging period, because he might double check before he went to sleep. And then you can tell him, well, okay, the next charging period will just start at 2 in the night, so you will sleep until then. So I think this is very important in order to make people even activate this feature. You could also do it like hidden, and you could also just say like, okay, we have the car, we got it, and we just want to charge it full until 7 a.m. next morning. That's fine. But what if the user decides that he needs to go to the hospital at 4 a.m. in the morning? So I think transparency is something that's really important here. Otherwise, if such case gets to publicity, I think that would be even more than just this one person would be really disturbed by the feature.
I mean, not really like hiding it from the customer, but rather, showing them that there's not big of a burden that's coming to the customer, and they're only benefiting from the advantages.
Yeah.
So, I mean, personally, I see the point. Transparency is always important.
Yeah.
Use cases need to be for fit for certain use cases. When you need the full car at 4 a.m. in the bush or something.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just like to only show kind of the positive aspects of it, rather than making it more complicated to the customer.
Yeah, that's a good point actually. I can say from the project environment where I'm working right now, we have a lot of engineers who think like, okay, we can do the most fancy things with our infrastructure. We can also do it in the software. But the problem that we realized way too late, we never included some UX experts in this. So we actually have roles in our company which are called UX experts. So they know what their task is to make sure what's the user perspective, what is the user experience. And this should be, from our experience now, the first step in every engineering process. So before you think about a solution, you always have to think about what problem do you want to solve. And maybe for some people, there is no problem at all with just charging the highest tariff, because if you, for example, have a company car and the company pays for the electricity price, why would you care about doing this? I mean, there's obviously reasons, but there's also people who just don't care about it. So they don't want this, they just want the like full power at the very start until the car's full. Then there's techies. They could be like playing around with this all day, all night, and they just want to, charge their phone with the last kilowatt hour of their car. I don't know. But this is very important. Also for me personally, it's a takeaway that you always need to have the UX first. So you have to understand what does the user need, what the users want. And I know it sounds a bit stupid, but as Mercedes, we can say we assume our vehicles, all vehicle owners might have an own home. They might have a garage with wallbox. Maybe at Fiat it looks a bit different, but this is also part of UX to understand who's your group or your customer group. Because selling a car for 100K is probably different than selling a Dacia, which has the same validity, is even better in the streets, maybe in the city, but it just costs 20K. So you have a different target group, a different audience, and they also have different needs when it comes to smart charging. Yeah. But I totally understand that, and I would also support engaging this more, finding more ways to reach people using it, because that's in the end what my project is now reliable on. Yeah.
So those assumptions are for Berlin, or would you say it is a global assumption?
Which assumptions do you mean?
It's so you were saying that at Mercedes believe that everyone has how you call it? Uni home, like horizontal home.
Yeah.
It's an assumption.
No, it's not an assumption we take. We assume that we might have more customers who would have it than maybe other OEMs, not all of them, but maybe others. So we always have in mind, okay, we need this to be like luxury and convenience, which is not like, which doesn't make the product maybe better or more cheap or more green, but it's just more addressing the people that we might address with our cars. So the assumption that we make is, I'm not too deep into this, but this is more also a global assumption. But maybe also from my experience, I know that the assumptions that we make for the world are mostly driven by the knowledge and the experience in Stuttgart and around Stuttgart, which is not comparable to Berlin. Yeah.
I would say it depends on the region.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
It's not income, it's the region.
Yeah.
In San Francisco, in New York, for example, it's
Yeah.
a totally vertical housing.
Yeah.
Right? It's so. I mean.
Yeah, totally. And then when it comes to thinking about this, and for example, okay, we cannot reach everyone. That's just something that we have to accept. So there's also public charging solutions. But then one step further is thinking, how can we even save more money, even though people might care a bit less about cost. Then V2G would be the logical next step. But what's then forgotten, for example, is in order to have V2G running at your home, you need the V2G wallbox, which is more expensive in the first place. So there's always like more steps behind taking these assumptions. You have to have the agreement of the landlord, for example, to set up a wallbox and maybe even to have V2G. So there's a lot of constraints that have to be considered when thinking about UX. I totally agree that this is not income driven, it's more like region driven.
Yes, and for me it would be a global trend and vertical housing.
Yeah.
Right? So
Yeah.
maybe Australia has extra land,
Yeah.
but it's not the reality of all the other developed regions, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, speaking from my perspective at least, this is something that you can just scale to a very limited amount of people, because in the end, to make a mobility change, you would need more car sharing. And how do you want to do smart charging if one user sets like the departure time in the state of charge and someone totally different wants to use the car next? So this is also something which isn't thought about at all, at least not in my area. And this is something, which definitely needs to be addressed more. Now it's more like rolling something out and seeing how it's accepted, how it's used. Because I think many OEMs are just at early stages, not very early stages, but many are at early stages, and we need to get to know the customers. That's very important to get the feedback loop. Yeah, and this is the issues of perspective, and we talked about like global now, and that's also the second issue with the market. So what I told you guys, UX is very important. So do you want more UX or do you want more automation? Do you want everything to be steered by some external system, or do you also want to have like more influence on this? What is convenient, what is not convenient, what is luxurious, what is not luxurious, what does save you money, what not? And this is very, very important also to solve here. And then secondly, there's the interoperability, which is mainly given because there are standards in the market for EVs and for charging. So you can assume that modern cars and modern wallboxes can communicate with each other, but then of course you need the right backend and you need the right tariff for everything, and you need the right regulations. Can you even use this at your place if you have like a one house here, one house in Spain? I don't know. Can you even use the same feature in both markets? And then obviously economic incentives. What's really interesting? What's really needed at the people's, and in the end also who's responsible if something fails. We just touched this briefly, like you could set up that everything runs automatically, but what if your internet provider fails, who has nothing to do with smart charging? Who's responsible for this? Who's responsible for you not getting to work the next morning? And then it's you. You will be shouted out by your boss. So this is there's a lot of challenges that have to be solved. Obviously also a lot of upsides about smart charging, but definitely a lot of challenges. And these have to be addressed in every market specifically. We cannot really assume that once we have some product going on in Stuttgart, it applies in Berlin, or it applies in France or the price in the US or the price somewhere else in the world. So it's very, very interesting and very important to make sure you have the right audience and the right people in mind. And this is what I also mentioned when having many engineers linked together. They thought about the technically optimal solution, but this was not market ready. So we had to make so many adjustments. We had to delay our return for live 3 times now. So it's really frustrating from that perspective, but that's just to make sure that we are market ready. And that's in the end what's important here. All right. Next, I would like you guys to get together in groups. Should we maybe do a quick break before? Maybe 5 minutes, that's okay? Then we continue at 23. Yeah. All right. Maybe I can give you a little hint already. So it's about you guys doing some research, discussing groups, and also presenting the audience. And the question, which I think is interesting, is if AI can be a solution for these challenges and for the complexity of this. I think it's often presented as a key enabler. There's high expectations, but I would like you guys to split up after a quick break and discuss, maybe pro or con, maybe also from business and user perspective, what would be good and what would not be good. So let this sink in, take a quick break, take some fresh air, and then we can discuss and split up in groups after a quick break. Let's meet again at 23. We are here again. I think with this group size, we should split up maybe in 3 groups. Let me share my thoughts with you guys. So I thought either we split up in 3 groups, and then we have one group which says AI at vehicle and user level. Second is AI at system and grid and market level, and the third one is why AI will fail and should be limited. Maybe we also have some people who would like to cover this position, or if you would like to just split in 2 groups, then we can discuss AI can be the solution, while AI is not the solution. But with the amount of people, I would say maybe we can split up in 3 groups. And I would like you guys to do it yourself. So maybe group 1 is in the very back, group 2 in the middle, and group 3 can be here.
3.
3? Perfect. Yeah. No, you can sort yourself. Like you can choose yourself which group do you want to be in.
I understood group 3. Like,
No, but maybe they should leave it back there.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So who wants to discuss AI at the vehicle and user level? Right?
I think that's the most easiest one if you actually listen.
Yeah. Okay. You want to be part of it?
No.
Okay. Then group 2, AI at system with market level. All right. And then last one, why AI fails or should be limited.
Why is AI?
All right.
Face or
Fails. Yeah, sorry, it's very small. Yeah. All right, then find yourself together in groups, and I would say let's take 10 minutes of time to discuss. Write down some bullet points. I also got some guiding questions for you guys. So the task is to, as a group, take a clear position. Maybe just for today, maybe you have it yourself. Take a clear position on AI and smart charging. Be realistic, not too futuristic, not thinking 7, and consider technical and also non-technical things here. You can use those questions if you like. But what would be good to discuss in the end, to discuss within the 3 groups altogether, is maybe to think about 1 or 2 concrete AI use cases, one great benefit, one hard limitation, from each level, and also yeah, maybe one or two pro and cons. Any questions? All right, if not, then find together in the back for AI from a user perspective. Here maybe in the middle, AI from a market and grid perspective. And then in the back for AI control, where AI would fail and maybe should also be limited. All right, then 10 minutes.
The presentation.
I will make sure that you guys will get it.
Yeah. There's something like you do. Yeah, when it comes to like based on the events.
Do you want to present it to him?
Well, what is the thought that I wish you guys had to say? Not futuristic. Let's see.
So how do we put OEM as stakeholder?
What's the question?
Yes,
I think, yeah, because they are also responsible to make because they provide the car and they might even have an app. But they might even have an app, so they are
At global level.
You don't get that.
I'm gonna narrow it down. Yeah, no, thank you so much. You're the one that has. Yeah. Now you come up with the name.
That's up to you. That's, I mean, the general use of AI can be done anywhere in the system, anywhere in the source. It's up to you to discuss and make.
So what
Yes, yeah.
So for me, for the creator, and for the user, it's pricing. The battery.
That's no problem. You can.
So
You mean the